Emma had always thought that mornings were the calmest part of her house, a quiet bubble where the world outside didn't matter. But that Saturday was different. She woke early, sunlight spilling through the kitchen windows, and the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. Daniel was already gone to work, leaving her alone with the house, and for a moment, she felt the rare peace of having everything under control. She moved around the kitchen, stacking dishes, wiping crumbs from the counter, humming softly to herself. It was a routine she liked, something small that made her feel like she belonged. Even though she had married Daniel 2 years ago, blending their family hadn't been easy. His son, Jake, was 16, awkward, stubborn, and still protective of the memory of his late mother. Emma had tried to give him space, never pushing, always careful not to overstep. But even with all her effort, she often felt like an outsider in her own home. The sound of running water from the bathroom broke her rhythm, unusual for that early hour. She paused, frowning slightly, then knocked gently on the door. "Jake, are you in there?" she called, expecting a sleepy voice to answer, expecting a simple yes or no, but the reply never came. Curiosity mixed with concern, and she pushed the door open, thinking maybe he had fallen asleep in the shower or slipped somehow. That was when she saw him, and her world shifted in an instant. Jake stood frozen, startled, caught in a moment of private vulnerability. His eyes widened, his cheeks red with shock, and for a heartbeat, they just looked at each other, neither knowing what to say. Emma's mind raced, guilt washing over her as she realized she had invaded his privacy, something she would never want to do intentionally. She quickly turned away, her heart hammering, and rushed to the hallway, feeling the weight of embarrassment, shame, and confusion pressing down on her all at once. She could hear Jake's hurried movements behind the closed door, his muttered apologies mixing with the sound of water, and she felt a sharp pang of regret. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes, trying to calm herself. The house suddenly felt too small, too loud with emotions she wasn't ready to face. She had always thought she understood Jake, that she could read his moods and know when to give him space. But this moment reminded her how little she truly knew, how sudden life could throw them into situations neither of them were prepared for. Minutes passed, each second stretching painfully, and finally, she turned back to knock on the door again, softer this time, more hesitant. "Jake, are you okay?" she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her own anxiety. She waited, unsure if he would respond, unsure if the balance between them had just shifted in a way that couldn't be fixed. When he finally opened the door, wrapped in a towel and still flushed with embarrassment, Emma felt the weight of the unspoken tension between them. He avoided her eyes at first, but she could see the mixture of guilt and relief in his posture. Relief that she hadn't reacted angrily, guilt that she had walked in at the exact wrong moment. The air between them was heavy, fragile, as if one wrong word could shatter everything. Emma took a deep breath, forcing herself to speak calmly. "It's okay, Jake, just be careful next time," she said, keeping her tone light. Even though her heart was still racing, she wanted him to feel safe, to know that she wasn't judging him, that she wasn't angry, but inside, she couldn't shake the shock, the strange mix of worry and new awareness that she now saw Jake differently, not in a negative way, but in a way that reminded her he was growing up, changing faster than she could keep track. Jake nodded quickly, his voice barely audible. "Sorry. I didn't think." And then he trailed off, unsure how to explain himself. He avoided her gaze, fidgeting with the towel, and Emma realized just how much he still needed guidance, how much he needed someone who could see him without judgment, someone he could trust. She felt a deep surge of empathy, realizing that embarrassment and vulnerability were part of growing up, and that this moment, awkward as it was, might actually open the door for honesty between them. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but tense, and Emma finally stepped back, giving him space, Her mind replayed the incident over and over, trying to understand her own feelings. Her heart ached not for the shock of the moment, but for the sudden awareness of Jake's inner world, the complexities of being a teenager who had already faced loss, the fragile line between childhood and adulthood. She turned away, pretending to busy herself with tidying the hallway, but she couldn't help stealing glances toward the bathroom, worried about how Jake was feeling and already thinking about how to approach the topic later, in a way that was supportive, not invasive. She knew she had to tread carefully, that words mattered now more than ever, and that this single moment, brief as it was, had already begun to change the relationship between them. Emma's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door opening, Daniel returning earlier than expected, and she quickly straightened herself, hiding the tumult of emotions behind a calm face. But deep inside, she felt a shift, something delicate and profound, as if that single, accidental moment had opened a new chapter in their lives, a chapter where trust, understanding, and connection would need to be rebuilt carefully, and where nothing would ever be exactly the same again. The day went on, but Emma felt an underlying tension, a mixture of guilt, empathy, and a strange anticipation. She wondered how Jake was processing the event, if he was thinking about her the way she was thinking about him, and for the first time, she realized that her role in his life was more complicated than she had imagined. By the evening, Emma understood that this morning, this one accidental intrusion, had created an invisible thread between them, fragile but undeniable, and she knew that how they moved forward from here would define their relationship in ways neither of them could predict. The day that had started calm had ended with a quiet storm of emotions, leaving Emma both shaken and aware that life in their blended family was about to change forever. The days after that morning felt different for Emma. She noticed little changes in Jake, small gestures that hinted at his own unease and curiosity. He moved quietly around the house, sometimes pausing near her in ways that made her heart tighten, not from shock but from awareness. She realized that the incident had left its mark on both of them, a silent acknowledgement of something unspoken. Emma tried to act normal, to keep their routine unchanged, but inside, she was alert to every glance, every tone of voice, every hesitation in his movements. She watched him as he went about his day, doing homework at the kitchen table or walking down the hallway with headphones on, and she wondered what he was thinking, whether he was replaying that morning in his mind as much as she was. Jake, for his part, seemed distant at first, avoiding conversation and keeping his eyes down, but gradually, Emma noticed moments where he let his guard slip, small cracks in the wall he had built around himself, a late-night sound of him opening his door to grab water, a quiet smile when she made a joke in the kitchen, tiny signals that told her he was trying to reconcile the awkwardness between them. One evening, the tension became impossible to ignore. A storm had rolled in, rain hammering against the windows and wind rattling the frames. The house felt smaller, cocooned, as if the weather had pressed them together and left no room for pretense. Emma found herself sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her, watching the rain, and Jake appeared in the doorway, hesitating before speaking. I wanted to talk," he said, voice low but steady. He sat down a few feet away, careful to give them both space, and Emma nodded, encouraging him silently. She didn't rush, letting him choose his words, letting him control the pace, which was something she had learned mattered more than anything with him. "I know what happened that morning," he said finally, and Emma felt a shiver of emotion, not because he was accusing her, but because he was acknowledging it, because he trusted her enough to speak about it at all. She reached out, placing a hand gently on the armrest near him, not touching him directly, just showing that she was present, listening, safe. "I know it was weird, and I'm sorry if it made things awkward," he continued, and Emma could hear the vulnerability in his tone, the way a teenage boy struggled to express feelings he didn't fully understand. She smiled softly, warmth filling her chest, and said, It's okay, Jake. Really, I understand. We all have moments we don't expect, and it doesn't change how I feel about you. That night, their conversation wandered beyond the incident, touching on his school, his friends, his fears about growing up. His voice grew more confident as he spoke, and Emma felt a strange relief mixed with admiration, seeing him open up in a way she hadn't seen before. The trust between them was shifting, forming a new layer, one that was honest and real, rather than forced or polite. Over the next week, Emma noticed a pattern, a small smile here, a shared laugh there. Jake began to test the boundaries of comfort, not in rebellion, but in cautious connection. He left notes on the fridge, short messages that made her smile. Thanks for the cookies, or good luck on your meeting. Little gestures that hinted at a desire to be close, to feel safe, to be seen, and Emma reciprocated, leaving notes of her own, creating a silent language that belonged only to them. One evening, while helping him with a difficult homework problem, Emma felt a surge of pride and tenderness. Jake had struggled for weeks with math, and tonight he finally understood. His face lit up with relief and excitement, and he glanced at her with a shy grin. "Thanks, Emma." "I mean it," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her heart swell. She realized that the awkward moment in the bathroom had become a turning point, leading to moments of real connection she hadn't anticipated. Even mundane activities carried weight now, like cooking dinner together, watching a movie, or walking the dog. They shared stories and jokes, sometimes lingering too long in conversation, sometimes just sitting in silence. But the silence was comfortable, not tense. She began to see Jake not just as Daniel's son, not just as her stepson, but as a person who needed understanding, guidance, and care, someone whose heart she could reach without overstepping. One night, the rain returned, pattering against the roof in a steady rhythm. Emma and Jake sat near the window, the soft glow of the living room lights making the house feel safe. He turned to her suddenly, expression serious. I like that we can talk now," he said, and Emma felt a lump in her throat. The honesty in his words, so simple, so sincere, meant more than any grand gesture. It was proof that they were building a real bond, a connection born from trust, even from awkward beginnings. Emma reached out again, hand resting near his, careful, gentle. "Me too, Jake," she said softly. "I'm proud of you for sharing, for trusting, for being yourself." His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the tension of the past weeks melted, leaving only understanding, a bond that felt fragile but strong, delicate but resilient. By the end of the week, Emma realized that their relationship had shifted in a way she hadn't predicted. The incident in the bathroom, once a source of shock and guilt, had become the catalyst for honesty, empathy, and connection. They laughed more, spoke more, and even shared quiet moments of reflection together, discovering that trust could grow even from uncomfortable situations, and that bonds could deepen in unexpected ways. Emma knew boundaries were still vital, that respect and care had to guide every step, but she also knew that this new connection, this opening of hearts, had changed everything. She felt hope, a quiet, steady hope, that their family, though imperfect, could find a balance, that love and understanding could bridge the gaps of awkwardness and hesitation, and that Jake, too, was learning to navigate life's challenges with her support. And as she watched him drift off to sleep later that night, Emma realized something important. Life wasn't about avoiding mistakes or awkward moments. It was about how you handled them, how you reached out when it mattered, how you listened when no one else would, and she knew that, together, they were building something lasting, something real, something that could survive anything, even the moments that once seemed impossible to face. Days turned into weeks, and Emma could feel the invisible thread between her and Jake growing stronger. It wasn't sudden, but subtle, in glances, in quiet laughter, in shared moments that didn't need words. She watched him navigate school, friends, and the small challenges of teenage life, and she felt a deep pride, not just as a stepmother, but as someone who had earned a place in his heart. Jake, too, seemed transformed, more confident, more willing to share. He started talking about his day without hesitation, asked for advice about things he had never mentioned before, and even invited her to help with decisions, like which classes to take or how to handle disagreements with friends. Emma listened, offering guidance but never judgment, creating a safe space where he felt seen and understood. One quiet evening, Emma found herself in the kitchen preparing dinner while Jake set the table. The rain tapped gently against the windows, a comforting rhythm, and for a moment, she paused, watching him move with ease and focus. Realizing how far they had come from that awkward morning, she smiled softly, her heart warmed by the trust that had grown between them. "Emma," Jake said suddenly, pausing with a fork in his hand. I'm glad we can talk now, really talk." His voice was steady but carried the honesty of someone still learning to express feelings. Emma nodded, touched by his words. "Me too, Jake, I'm glad," she replied, her voice gentle. "It means a lot to me that you trust me." They ate dinner together, the conversation flowing naturally about school, dreams, and even silly moments from the day. No tension, no awkwardness, just a sense of ease that had taken weeks to build. Afterward, they lingered in the living room, talking as the storm outside softened. The house felt warmer, safer, a place where mistakes could be forgiven and trust could grow stronger. Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from the shock and guilt of that morning to the deep bond they now shared. She realized that relationships weren't about perfection but about connection, about showing up, about listening, and about creating a space where the other person could be themselves. Jake's laughter, his questions, his quiet moments of doubt and reflection. All of it had become part of a shared understanding that neither of them had expected. One night, as they were finishing homework together, Jake paused, looking thoughtful. "Emma, do you think things will always be this awkward between step-parents and kids?" he asked, a trace of worry in his voice. Emma shook her head, smiling gently. "Not if we keep talking, keep listening, and keep being honest with each other," she said. "Awkward moments happen, but they don't have to define us." Jake nodded slowly, a small smile forming, and Emma felt a rush of relief. She realized that he was starting to see her not just as someone in the house, not just as Daniel's wife, but as someone who genuinely cared for him, someone who had his back, and someone he could trust with his thoughts, fears, and hopes. The bond between them was no longer fragile. It was resilient, built from honesty, care, and shared experiences. Over the next few days, Emma noticed even more changes. Jake seemed lighter, happier, more willing to engage. He invited her into small moments, like helping him organize his desk, picking out a new backpack, or even sharing music he liked. Emma found herself laughing more, feeling connected in ways that were deep and meaningful, moments that made her feel like she belonged, not just in the house, but in his life. One evening, as they watched a movie together, Jake leaned slightly closer, just enough to show comfort, and Emma realized that their relationship had reached a place where trust and affection could exist without boundaries being crossed. She felt a quiet joy, understanding that love could take many forms and that a stepmother and stepson could have a bond that was emotional, supportive, and real. Emma knew that challenges would come, that misunderstandings might still happen, but she felt confident in the foundation they had built. She remembered that awkward morning in the bathroom, once a source of shock and guilt, and now saw it as the turning point, the moment that had forced them to face honesty, vulnerability, and the need for connection. Jake, sensing her thoughts, spoke softly. "Emma, thanks for being here, for everything," and Emma's heart swelled. "I'll always be here, Jake," she said, her voice steady and warm. "You don't have to face anything alone." The simple words carried more weight than any grand gesture, more power than any dramatic scene, because they were real, honest, and heartfelt. They spent the evening talking about plans for the weekend, little things like a trip to the park, baking cookies, or watching a new show. The ease between them was unmistakable, the awkward tension of the past replaced by trust, laughter, and mutual respect. Emma realized that their bond was no longer defined by family roles alone, but by the connection they had nurtured together. By the time Jake went to bed, Emma felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. She knew that life was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes uncomfortable, but it was also full of opportunities for growth, understanding, and love. The journey they had taken from that shocking morning to this moment had shown her that even difficult or awkward experiences could become the foundation for something beautiful. Emma sat by the window afterward, watching the night sky, reflecting on the changes, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known before. The house was quiet, safe, and warm, and for the first time, she felt that their blended family could not only survive challenges but grow stronger because of them. She smiled, thinking of Jake, of his laughter, his questions, his trust, and knew that they had built something lasting, a bond that could carry them through any storm. And as the rain returned softly, tapping against the roof, Emma whispered to herself, a quiet promise, "We've come so far, and this is only the beginning." She felt hope, love, and a deep connection that went beyond family labels, understanding that trust, honesty, and care could transform even the most awkward, difficult moments into the strongest bonds, and that together, they could face anything, stronger than before, ready for whatever life brought next.